Nathan Cole's hand froze on the trigger when he saw them. 2 plates on his table, 2 forks, 2 cups. Like someone actually expected him to come home. 20 years he'd eaten alone in this house. 20 years of 1 plate, 1 chair, 1 life that had forgotten what it felt like to matter to another human being. And now a strange woman stood in his kitchen, calmly slicing potatoes, looking up at him with eyes that held no fear, and said the words that would shatter everything he'd built to protect himself. "I set supper for 2 because I knew you'd be hungry. And because no one should eat alone when there's someone willing to stay." Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel and stay with me until the very end of this story. Comment below with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Nathan's voice came out rough from months of not using it for anything but commanding cattle. "Put the knife down." The woman set it on the counter, her movements unhurried. She wiped her hands on the apron, his mother's apron, the one he'd kept folded in the drawer for 2 decades. "My name is Clara Whitmore," she said. "I'm the new school teacher. I arrived in town 3 days ago, and there was nowhere safe for a woman alone to stay. So you broke into my house." The door was unlocked. Nathan's jaw tightened. "That don't make it yours." "I know." Clara met his eyes without flinching. "But I made you supper anyway." The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread filled the small kitchen. Nathan's stomach twisted with hunger he'd been ignoring for the last 18 hours of riding. He lowered the rifle, but didn't set it down. "You got 10 seconds to explain why I shouldn't ride into town and fetch the sheriff." "Because you won't." Clara's voice stayed steady. "Sheriff Dawson told me you're an honest man. He said if anyone in this territory would let a stranger stay 1 night without harm, it would be Nathan Cole." Dawson's got a big mouth. He was trying to be kind. Kind gets people hurt. Clara picked up the knife again and returned to the potatoes. "The stew's almost ready. You can throw me out after you eat, or you can throw me out now. Either way, I'm grateful you keep your door unlocked." Nathan stood there, 20 years of solitude pushing against something he couldn't name. The woman wasn't begging, wasn't crying, she was just cooking, like this was the most natural thing in the world. He set the rifle against the wall. Clara didn't smile, but something in her shoulders relaxed. She ladled stew into both bowls and carried them to the table. Nathan watched her move through his kitchen with a familiarity that should have felt wrong, but somehow didn't. "I don't eat with strangers," he said. "Then ask me questions. By the time we finish, we won't be strangers anymore." Nathan pulled out the chair, the same chair he'd sat in alone for 20 years, and lowered himself into it. The stew steamed in front of him, thick with vegetables and meat he hadn't bought. "Where'd you get the food?" "I brought supplies from Boston, more than I needed for the journey." Clara sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap. "I wasn't sure what I'd find when I arrived." "And what did you find?" "A town that doesn't trust outsiders, and a schoolhouse with a leaking roof." Nathan took a bite. The flavor hit him like a memory he'd been trying to forget. His mother's cooking, warmth, home. He forced himself to swallow. "You cook like this, you won't have trouble finding a husband." "I had a husband." Clara's voice didn't waver. "He died 2 years ago." The silence stretched between them. Nathan took another bite, then another. Clara ate slowly, watching him with dark eyes that had seen their share of loss. "I'm sorry," he finally said. "So am I. But that still don't explain why you're here." Clara set down her spoon. "After Thomas died, his family wanted to control everything. Where I lived, what I did, who I spoke to. They had plans for my life that didn't include my opinion. So I applied for teaching positions as far from Boston as I could find." She paused. Wyoming was far enough. Nathan understood running. He'd been doing it for 20 years, just in a different direction. "The teacher's cottage won't be ready for 2 weeks," Clara continued. The church ladies offered me a room, but Mrs. Henderson made it clear she expected me to attend 3 services on Sunday and help with every charity function in exchange. Sheriff Dawson mentioned you had space and rarely came to town. So you figured I wouldn't notice. I figured you wouldn't care. Nathan pushed his empty bowl away. His stomach felt full for the first time in months, but the fullness brought an ache he'd learned to avoid. I care. Then I'll leave tonight. Clara stood and began clearing the table. But may I ask one question first? What? When's the last time someone cooked you a hot meal? The answer stuck in Nathan's throat. He watched Clara wash the dishes in the basin, her movements efficient and sure. 20 years. 20 years since he'd come home to anything but cold silence and memories that cut deeper than any war wound. You can stay tonight, he heard himself say. Tomorrow, I'll take you back to town. Clara's hands stilled in the water. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Nathan grabbed his rifle and headed for the door. He needed air. He needed distance. He needed to remember why he'd spent 2 decades making sure he never owed anyone anything, or let anyone close enough to matter. Nathan, he stopped, his hand on the doorframe. The bedroom's yours, Clara said quietly. I'll sleep by the fire. That ain't, I know whose house this is. I'm not taking your bed, too. Nathan wanted to argue, but the woman had already made up her mind. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the same stubbornness he recognized in himself. Fine, but you leave at first light. He walked out into the night, leaving Clara alone in the kitchen. The stars spread across the Wyoming sky like they always did, indifferent to human struggle. Nathan had spent years finding comfort in that indifference. Tonight, it felt empty. He checked the horses, inspected the fence line, did everything he could to avoid going back inside. But the temperature dropped, and his body ached from the long ride, and eventually, he had no choice. When he pushed open the door, Clara was sitting by the fire with a book in her lap. She changed into a simple nightdress and wrapped herself in one of his old blankets. The sight of her there, reading by lamplight, hit him harder than he expected. Thought you'd be asleep by now, he said. I'm not tired, Clara closed the book, and I wanted to make sure you came back. Where else would I go? I don't know. But men who live alone for 20 years usually have their reasons. Nathan hung his hat on the peg by the door. What makes you think it's been 20 years? The dust, the silence, the way you looked at me when I was cooking, like you'd seen a ghost. Clara's voice stayed gentle, but her words cut clean. You're not hiding from the law, Nathan Cole. You're hiding from something worse. You got no right. You're right. I don't. She stood, folding the blanket with care. But I recognize a person trying to outrun their past, because I'm doing the same thing. Nathan felt something crack in his chest, a wall he'd built, stone by stone, over 2 decades. You should get some sleep. So should you. They stood there in the small house, 2 people who'd learned to survive alone, neither quite sure how to navigate sharing the same space. Clara? Yes? That's Stu. It was good. The smallest smile touched her lips. I'm glad. She settled by the fire, and Nathan retreated to his bedroom. He lay on the bed, fully clothed, listening to the house settle around him. For 20 years it had been silent. Tonight he could hear Clara's breathing, the rustle of the blanket, the small sounds of another human being alive in his space. He didn't sleep. When dawn broke gray and cold, Nathan found Clara already awake, coffee brewing on the stove. She'd folded the blanket and tidied the main room. Her bag sat packed by the door. Coffee's ready, she said. Nathan poured himself a cup, the bitter heat grounding him. You didn't have to clean. I wanted to leave the house better than I found it." They drank in silence. Nathan kept expecting her to plead, to ask for more time, to use tears or manipulation. Clara did none of those things. She simply finished her coffee, washed the cup, and picked up her bag. "I'm ready when you are." Nathan looked at this woman who'd invaded his home and his carefully ordered solitude. She stood straight-backed and proud, no trace of regret in her eyes. Whatever she'd left behind in Boston, it had forged her into something stronger than self-pity. "Put the bag down," he said. Clara's hand tightened on the handle. "What?" 2 weeks. That's what you said. 2 weeks until the cottage is ready." "I thought—" "I changed my mind." Nathan set down his cup, his voice rough. "But there's rules. You cook, I'll handle the ranch work. You stay out of my way, I'll stay out of yours. And when those 2 weeks are up, you leave. No arguments, no extending. 2 weeks. Clara set the bag down slowly. "Why?" "Because that stew was the first decent meal I've had in months, and I'm tired of my own cooking." The lie came easier than the truth, that he'd spent the whole night realizing how much he'd missed the simple sound of someone else breathing in the darkness. 2 weeks, Clara agreed. "And Nathan?" "What?" "Thank you for trusting me." "I don't trust you. I'm just tired of being hungry." But they both knew he was lying. The first 3 days passed in careful silence. Nathan left before dawn to work the ranch. Clara cleaned, organized, cooked meals that made the house smell like something other than dust and regret. They ate dinner together without speaking more than necessary. 2 people learning to orbit around each other without collision. On the 4th morning, Nathan came in from checking the fence line to find Clara standing in his mother's old garden plot, hands on her hips. "This soil's good," she said. "Why aren't you growing anything?" "Don't have time for gardens." "You have time. You just don't want to make time." Nathan felt irritation flare. "You're here 2 weeks, remember? Not long enough to plant anything." "But long enough to prepare the soil for next season." Clara turned to face him. "Unless you plan to let it go to waste again. What I do with my land ain't your concern." "You're right." She brushed dirt from her hands. "I apologize." She walked past him into the house, and Nathan stood there feeling like he'd just won an argument he didn't want to win. He looked at the garden plot. 20 years of neglect. Weeds and hard soil where his mother had once grown vegetables that fed them through winter. That night at dinner, Clara was quieter than usual. "Something wrong with the food?" Nathan asked. "No, the food's fine." "Then what?" Clara met his eyes. "I overstepped today. About the garden. It's your home, your land, your choice. I had no right to judge." Nathan cut into his meat, chewing slowly. "My mother kept that garden. After she died, I let it go." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's been 20 years. I should have done something with it by now." He paused. "You want to work it? Go ahead. Just don't expect me to help." Clara's face brightened, and Nathan realized with a start that he'd just offered her more than garden space. He'd offered her a piece of his past. "I'll need tools," she said. "Barn, 2nd shelf on the left." "And seeds?" "General store in town. Put it on my account." They finished dinner in comfortable silence, a shift from the careful quiet of the previous days. After Clara washed the dishes, she surprised him by sitting across from him, instead of retreating to her book by the fire. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Depends on what it is." "Sheriff Dawson mentioned you were in the war. Confederate or Union?" Nathan's hand tightened on his cup. "Union. Wyoming wasn't a state yet, but I enlisted in '62. "That's a long time to carry those memories." "Some things don't get lighter with time." Clara nodded slowly, Thomas died at Shiloh. I never got to bury him. They sent me a letter and his pocket watch. That was all." The air between them shifted, filling with shared understanding. Nathan had seen enough war widows to recognize the particular kind of grief that came from losing someone to battle. The not knowing, the questions that would never have answers. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Everyone's sorry, but sorry doesn't bring them back, and it doesn't tell me what to do with the rest of my life." Clara's voice stayed steady. "So I chose teaching. I chose Wyoming. I chose to keep moving forward even when everything in me wanted to stop." "That's brave." "No. Brave would have been staying and fighting Thomas's family for my right to grieve in my own way. This was just running, same as what you're doing." Nathan should have been angry at the accusation. Instead, he felt something close to relief. Someone finally seeing through the walls he'd built and not turning away. "Why'd you really choose my house?" he asked. Clara's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Because Sheriff Dawson said you were the loneliest man in the territory, and I thought maybe loneliness understood loneliness better than sympathy ever could." They sat there as the lamp burned low. Two people who'd spent years learning to survive alone, realizing that maybe, just maybe, survival wasn't the same as living. The next morning, Nathan found Clara already in the garden, turning over soil with a determination that made him stop and watch. She worked like someone who'd spent her life proving she didn't need help, every movement efficient and sure. He walked over and picked up the second spade. "Thought you weren't going to help," Clara said. "Changed my mind. Someone's got to make sure you don't plant the tomatoes where the beans should go." Clara laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard from her, and something in Nathan's chest loosened. A knot he'd been carrying for so long, he'd forgotten it was there. They worked side by side until noon, barely speaking, but the silence felt different now, shared instead of separate. When they finally stopped, Nathan's back ached and his hands were filthy, but the garden plot looked ready for spring planting. "Thank you," Clara said softly. "Don't mention it." But he knew they'd both crossed a line that morning, from strangers sharing space to something he didn't have words for yet. And when Clara smiled at him, dirt smudged on her cheek and hope in her eyes, Nathan felt the first crack in the armor he'd worn for 20 years. The 2 weeks were going to pass too quickly, and for the first time in decades, Nathan Cole wasn't sure he wanted to be alone anymore. But first, Nathan had to survive Sunday. Clara announced Saturday night that she planned to attend church service, and the look in her eyes made it clear she expected him to come with her. "I don't do church," Nathan said. "Neither did I for 2 years after Thomas died. But this town already thinks I'm scandalous for staying here. If I show up alone, they'll have me married off or run out by Tuesday. So bring the sheriff." "The sheriff isn't the one housing me." Clara folded her arms. "Please, Nathan, 1 hour. Then we'll never speak of it again." Nathan wanted to refuse. He'd avoided that church for 20 years, avoided the pitying looks and the questions about why a good man like him never remarried. But Clara stood there asking for protection, not pity, and he found himself nodding before he could think better of it. 1 hour. Then we leave. Clara's smile was worth the discomfort he knew was coming. Sunday morning, Nathan put on his cleanest shirt and tried to remember the last time he'd cared what anyone thought of his appearance. Clara emerged from the bedroom in a dark blue dress that made her look like a schoolteacher and a widow all at once. Respectable, untouchable, and somehow vulnerable. "You clean up nice," she said. "Don't get used to it." They rode into town in the wagon, the early sun warming the air. Nathan kept his eyes on the road, but he felt Clara watching him. "What?" he finally asked.
"You're nervous."
"I ain't nervous. Your jaw's been clenched since we left the ranch." Nathan forced himself to relax. "I just don't like crowds."
"Neither do I, but we'll survive it together."
The church was already full when they arrived. Conversations died as they walked through the door. Every eye in the building tracked their progress down the aisle. Nathan felt Clara's hand tighten on his arm, but she kept her head high, her steps steady. They took a seat in the back row. Nathan could feel the whispers crawling up his spine. Reverend Matthews started the service with a sermon about charity and judgment. Nathan tried to focus on the words, but all he could hear was the rustle of people turning to stare, the not quite hidden comments. "Living in sin, if you ask me," Mrs. Henderson stage whispered to her neighbor. "Poor man probably doesn't know what to do with a woman in the house," another voice replied. Clara's back went rigid. Nathan leaned close, his voice low. "Ignore them." "I am." But her hands were fisted in her lap, knuckles white. Nathan did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He reached over and covered her hand with his. Clara's fingers unclenched, wrapping around his palm like she was holding on to a lifeline. They sat like that through the entire service, hands joined while the town judged them. And Nathan realized he didn't care what any of these people thought, as long as Clara knew she wasn't alone. After the final hymn, they tried to leave quickly, but Mrs. Henderson blocked their path, her face arranged in false concern. "Miss Whitmore, I do hope you're finding suitable accommodation. The church ladies would be happy to host you properly until your cottage is ready." "Mrs. Cole's hospitality has been more than adequate," Clara said smoothly. "Mrs. Cole has been dead for 20 years, dear." "Then I suppose Mr. Cole has learned to be an excellent host in her absence." Nathan bit back a smile. Mrs. Henderson's mouth pinched tight. "Well, I suppose some people have different standards of propriety." "I suppose some people mind their own business," Nathan said quietly. "And some don't." Mrs. Henderson's face flushed red. She swept away in a rustle of skirts, and Nathan guided Clara toward the door before anyone else could corner them. Outside, Sheriff Dawson was waiting by their wagon, his expression apologetic. "Nathan, Miss Whitmore, Sheriff, I wanted to warn you both. There's talk. Some folks think it's improper, the living arrangement. Some folks should find better ways to spend their time," Nathan said. "I agree, but I also know how this town works. They see a woman staying with a bachelor, they assume the worst." Dawson looked at Clara. "I can speak to the church ladies again, see if they'll reconsider." "No," Clara said firmly. "I'm staying where I am." "Miss Whitmore, I'm a widow, Sheriff, not a child. I make my own choices about where I stay and with whom." Her voice carried across the churchyard, drawing more stares. "And if this town can't accept that a woman and a man can share a roof without scandal, that says more about their minds than our character." Nathan felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. Clara wasn't just defending herself. She was defending him, defending their unlikely arrangement against every judgment being thrown their way. "Let's go," he said quietly. They climbed into the wagon. As Nathan drove away, he could feel Clara shaking beside him, not with fear, but with rage. "I'm sorry," she said after a mile of silence. "For what?" "For making a scene. For putting your reputation at risk." Nathan pulled the wagon to a stop in the middle of the empty road. He turned to face her, and the words came out before he could stop them. "Clara, I lost my reputation 20 years ago when I came back from the war and couldn't look anyone in the eye without seeing the men I killed. This town has been whispering about me since the day I stopped pretending I was fine. You didn't ruin anything. If anything, you gave them something more interesting to talk about than how sad and broken Nathan Cole is." Clara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "You're not broken. Neither are you. But we're both cracked, and that's okay." He picked up the reins again. "And if they want to talk, let them talk. I've got work to do, and you've got a garden to plant. Their opinions don't change either of those things." Clara wiped her eyes. "When did you get so wise?" "About 5 minutes ago. Don't expect it to last." She laughed, and the sound chased away the last remnants of the church's judgment. When they got back to the ranch, Clara changed into her work dress and went straight to the garden. Nathan found her an hour later, digging with an intensity that spoke of fury more than gardening. "You trying to reach China?" he asked. "I'm trying not to march back to town and tell Mrs. Henderson exactly what I think of her Christian charity." Nathan picked up a spade. "Say it to me instead. I can take it." "You want to hear what I really think?" "Why not?" Clara stabbed the spade into the ground. "I think this town is full of people who are so desperate to feel superior, they'll tear down anyone who threatens their comfortable little judgments. I think they look at you and see a convenient target for their pity, because it makes them feel better about their own empty lives. And I think they look at me and see a woman who had the audacity to choose independence over security. And that terrifies them, because it means women don't have to accept the lives men plan for them." She was breathing hard, cheeks flushed, eyes blazing. Nathan had never seen anyone more alive. "You done?" he asked. "For now." "Good, because you're right about all of it, and I'm glad you said it." Clara blinked. "You are?" "I spent 20 years letting this town make me feel like I was less than whole because I couldn't move on from the war the way they thought I should. Took a stubborn widow from Boston to remind me I don't owe them anything except honest work and decent behavior." Nathan drove his spade into the soil. "So yeah, I'm glad you're angry. Means you're still fighting." They worked in silence for a while, the rhythm of digging and turning soil somehow soothing. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice quieter. "Thomas's family was like that too. Always so concerned with appearances, with doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. After he died, they wanted me to wear black for 5 years, live in their house, let them control every aspect of my life. They said it was because they loved me." She paused. "But love doesn't require that much control." "What does it require?" "I don't know anymore. Thomas and I married young. We were friends more than anything else. When he went to war, I promised to wait. And I did. But he never came home, and I never got to find out what we might have become." Nathan understood that kind of unfinished story. "You ever regret marrying him?" "No, but I regret never having the chance to see who we could have been together. All I have are possibilities, and a pocket watch that stopped at the moment he died." "Do you still have it? The watch?" "Always. It reminds me that time doesn't wait for us to figure things out." Clara looked at him directly. "So when I see a chance to plant a garden, or share a meal, or defend a good man against gossip, I take it. Because I learned that waiting for the perfect moment means missing the real ones." Nathan felt the words settle into his chest like stones dropped into still water, creating ripples he couldn't control. This woman had walked into his house uninvited and was systematically dismantling every wall he'd built. "We should get these beans in the ground," he said, because it was easier than admitting she was right. Clara smiled like she knew exactly what he was avoiding. "Yes, we should." Over the next week, they fell into a routine that felt dangerously close to partnership. Nathan worked the ranch. Clara tended the garden and prepared the schoolhouse for her teaching position. They took meals together, talking about everything and nothing. Books, weather, the best way to train a horse, whether cornbread needed sugar
or just salt and butter.
Nathan found himself coming in earlier each day, finding excuses to be near the house when Clara was there. And Clara started asking him questions about the ranch, about Wyoming, about the things he'd seen and done before the war made him into someone who preferred silence. Thursday evening, Clara was kneading bread dough when Nathan came in from checking the cattle. She glanced up and went still. What happened? Nathan looked down at his torn sleeve, the blood seeping through. Barbed wire. Caught it wrong. Sit down. It's nothing. Sit down. Nathan sat. Clara washed her hands and came over with the medical kit his mother had kept in the kitchen. She rolled up his sleeve carefully, her fingers gentle on his skin. This needs stitches, she said. I can handle it. I'm sure you can, but you don't have to. Clara threaded a needle with steady hands. I helped in the hospital after Thomas died. Saw enough wounds to know how to close them. Nathan watched her work, the lamplight catching in her dark hair. Her touch was competent but tender, each stitch placed with care. It had been so long since anyone had touched him with kindness instead of pity. There, Clara said finally, tying off the thread. Keep it clean and dry. Thank you. She started to pull away, but Nathan caught her hand. Clara looked down at him, and something passed between them. Recognition, possibility, fear. Clara. The knock on the door shattered the moment. Nathan stood, immediately alert. It was past dark. Nobody came to the ranch after sunset unless something was wrong. He opened the door to find a young man in an expensive suit, his face pinched with exhaustion and distaste. I'm looking for Clara Whitmore, the man said. Clara appeared at Nathan's shoulder, her face going pale. James. Hello, Clara. Your family sent me to bring you home. Nathan felt Clara stiffen beside him. The man, James, looked past Nathan like he wasn't worth acknowledging, his attention fixed on Clara. You need to come back to Boston. There are matters that require your attention. I'm not going anywhere, Clara said. Don't be foolish. You can't actually mean to stay in this godforsaken territory, teaching children in some primitive schoolhouse. That's exactly what I mean to do. James's expression hardened. Your father-in-law is dying, Clara. He's asking for you. And there are financial matters, inheritance, property. You have responsibilities. Nathan felt Clara's hand find his arm, gripping tight. He covered her hand with his, a silent message. I'm here. When did William fall ill? Clara asked, her voice shaking. 3 weeks ago. We've been searching for you ever since you left Boston. James finally looked at Nathan, his lip curling. Are you going to introduce me to your landlord? This is Nathan Cole, Clara said quietly. Nathan, this is James Whitmore, my late husband's younger brother. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a messenger. This was family, come to drag Clara back into the life she'd escaped. Mr. Cole. James's tone dripped condescension. I trust you've been adequately compensated for housing my sister-in-law. She's been earning her keep, Nathan said evenly. I'm sure she has. The implication was clear and ugly. Nathan felt rage build in his chest, but Clara's grip on his arm tightened. A warning, a plea. James, I'm sorry William is ill, but I'm not coming back. You don't have a choice. The inheritance. I don't want the inheritance. James laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. You say that now, but wait until you hear the amount. $60,000, Clara, enough to live comfortably for the rest of your life. All you have to do is come home and sign the papers. The number hung in the air between them. $60,000, a fortune that could change everything. Nathan felt Clara's hand slip from his arm. I need to think, she said. There's nothing to think about, James countered. You're coming back with me tomorrow. We have a hotel room in town. Pack your things."
No.
The word came out strong, but Nathan heard the tremor underneath. Clara was fighting, but the weight of expectation and obligation was crushing down on her. "I'll come to town tomorrow and we'll discuss this properly," Clara continued. "But I'm not leaving tonight, and I'm not making any promises." James's jaw tightened. "Fine. Tomorrow. 10 o'clock at the Grand Hotel. Don't make me come back here, Clara. It's beneath both of us." He left without another word, climbing into a fancy carriage that looked absurd on the rough Wyoming road. Nathan closed the door and turned to find Clara standing in the middle of the kitchen, her face unreadable.
$60,000, she said softly. That's a lot of money.
"It's everything. Security, freedom, independence." She looked at him, and her eyes were full of something that looked like grief.
"Everything I said I wanted when I left Boston.
But
it comes with conditions. It always does with the Whitmores. They'll want me back in Boston, back under their control, making decisions based on what's best for the family name instead of what's best for me."
Nathan wanted to tell her to refuse, to stay, to choose this half-built life they were creating over the security of wealth and Boston society. But he had no right to ask that of her. "What do you want, Clara?"
"I don't know anymore."
She sank into a chair, her hands shaking.
"A month ago, I would have said I wanted nothing from them. But now, $60,000 could build a real school here, could help this whole territory, could give me choices I've never had.
Could also trap you in a life you ran away from."
"Yes."
They sat in silence, the lamp burning low between them. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice barely a whisper.
"Will you come with me tomorrow, to town?"
"You sure you want me there?" "I'm sure I don't want to face them alone." Nathan nodded. "Then I'll be there." Clara stood and moved toward the bedroom, then stopped at the door.
"Nathan, that routine we fell into this week, the meals, the conversations, the garden, that felt more like freedom than any amount of money ever could."
She disappeared into the bedroom before he could respond, leaving Nathan alone with a dying fire and the terrible certainty that tomorrow might take away the first good thing he'd allowed himself to want in 20 years. Neither of them slept that night. Nathan heard Clara moving around past midnight, pacing like a caged animal. He got up and found her sitting at the kitchen table, Thomas's pocket watch open in her palm.
"It stopped at 2:47, she said without looking up. "The moment the bullet hit him. I used to wind it every day, trying to make time move forward. But it's broken."
"No amount of winding will fix it." Nathan sat across from her. "You thinking about going back?" "I'm thinking about what staying would cost me, and what leaving would cost me." Clara closed the watch with a soft click. "They're not the same thing, Nathan. Not anymore." "What changed?" She finally met his eyes. "You know what changed." The words sat between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to name. Nathan felt his chest tighten. $60,000 is a lot to walk away from. So is the first place I felt at home in 2 years. "Clara, please don't tell me what to do. I need to figure this out myself." Nathan nodded and stood. "I'll hitch the wagon at dawn." He went back to bed but didn't close his eyes. At first light, he found Clara already dressed, her face pale but determined. They rode to town in silence that felt nothing like the comfortable quiet they'd built over the past weeks. The Grand Hotel sat on Main Street, like a monument to everything Wyoming wasn't. All gilt edges and crystal chandeliers brought in from back east. James waited in the lobby with 2 other men, both dressed in expensive suits that made Nathan feel like dirt. "Clara!" James stood, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Right on time. I see you brought your escort?" "Nathan stays," Clara said firmly.
This is family business." "Then he's family. He stays, or I leave." James's jaw tightened, but he gestured to the private dining room. "Fine. Gentlemen, this is my late brother's widow, Clara Whitmore. Clara, this is Harrison Blackwell, our family attorney, and Victor Pemberton, father's financial advisor." The men nodded without warmth. Nathan recognized their type. Men who measured worth in dollars and looked at people like him as obstacles to profit. They sat around a polished table. James pushed a leather folder toward Clara. "The terms are simple. Father's dying.
He wants to see you one last time before he goes. In exchange, he's willing to release Thomas's full inheritance to you, $60,000 plus the family home in Boston." Clara opened the folder, scanning the papers. "And the conditions?" "You return to Boston within the month. You live in the family home for at least 2 years. And you agree to serve as a trustee for the family charitable foundation, which requires your presence at quarterly meetings." "So I have to give up my life here?" "What life?" James's voice dripped contempt. "Teaching farm children in a one-room schoolhouse? Living in some cowboy's house like a common—" "Finish that sentence," Nathan said quietly. "And we're done here." James's face flushed. "This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when you insult the woman sitting next to me." Blackwell cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should focus on the financial benefits." "Miss Whitmore, $60,000 is enough to live independently for the rest of your life. You wouldn't have to teach. You wouldn't have to rely on anyone's charity." "I'm not relying on charity. I'm earning my keep." "By cooking and cleaning?" Victor Pemberton's tone was oily. "Clara, you're a Whitmore. You deserve better than domestic servitude." Nathan felt Clara's hand clench in her lap. He reached over and covered it with his, not caring what these men thought. "I deserve to make my own choices," Clara said. "That's all I've ever wanted." "And you can," James said smoothly. "Take the money. Come back to Boston. Once Father passes, you'll be free to do whatever you want. Travel, invest, live anywhere in the world. But you have to fulfill the terms first." "How long does William have?" "Doctor says 6 months at most. Probably less." Clara's breath caught. For all her anger at the Whitmore family, William had been kind to her when Thomas was alive. The thought of him dying alone clearly hurt. "Can I think about it?" "We need an answer today. We're leaving on the afternoon train." James leaned forward. "Clara, be reasonable. What does Wyoming offer you that $60,000 can't provide?" Clara looked at Nathan, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. Security versus freedom. Obligation versus choice. A life planned by others versus a life built from nothing. "It offers me the chance to become someone other than Thomas Whitmore's widow," she said finally. "Here, I'm Clara. Just Clara. I teach because I want to, not because I need to. I plant gardens and cook meals and have conversations with someone who sees me as a person, not a possession." "How noble," James sneered. "And how long will that last when winter comes and you're freezing in some broken-down schoolhouse? When you realize this cowboy can't give you anything but hard work and poverty." Nathan started to stand, but Clara's grip on his hand tightened. "Nathan's given me more in 3 weeks than your family gave me in 5 years of marriage. He's given me respect, trust, the freedom to be angry and scared and human without judgment." "He's given you nothing but false hope," James shot back. "Look at him, Clara. Really look. He's a broke rancher with no future, no prospects, living in the past. Is that what you want? To waste your life on someone who can't even afford to buy you a decent dress?" The words hit like bullets. Nathan felt every one of them land, confirming what he'd known all along, that he had nothing to offer someone like Clara except a hard life and a lonely ranch.
We're done here. Nathan stood, pulling Clara up with him. Come on. Wait, Blackwell held up a hand. There's one more thing you should know, Miss Whitmore. The inheritance isn't just money. Your father-in-law is also leaving you controlling interest in the family textile business. That's 3 factories employing over 500 people. If you refuse the inheritance, those factories will be sold to the highest bidder. Most likely, they'll be broken up, the workers dismissed. Clara went still. William wouldn't do that. William wants to ensure the business stays in family hands. He trusts you to protect it. But if you refuse, the decision goes to the board of directors, and they've already received offers from competitors. That's blackmail, Nathan said. That's reality, Victor replied. Sometimes our choices affect more than just ourselves. Clara sank back into her chair, her face ashen. 500 workers. 500 families, James added, all depending on this inheritance being accepted and managed properly. Is your little Wyoming adventure worth destroying their livelihoods? Nathan felt sick. They'd trapped her perfectly, made it about more than money, more than family obligation. They'd made it about people who had no voice in this decision, but whose lives hung in the balance. How long do I have to decide? Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. The train leaves at 3 o'clock. Be on it, or the offer expires. James stood. I know this is difficult, Clara, but sometimes doing the right thing means sacrificing what we want for what's needed. Thomas understood that when he went to war. I thought you would too. The men filed out, leaving Clara and Nathan alone in the dining room. She sat motionless, staring at the papers spread across the table. Talk to me, Nathan said. 500 families, Nathan. Children who need their parents to have work. Women who depend on those wages to feed their families. Clara's hands shook. How can I choose my happiness over their survival? You don't know they'll sell the business. They will. Victor Pemberton has been trying to sell for years. William's the only one who refused. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. If I don't go back, I'm destroying lives, real people, who never did anything wrong except work for the Whitmore family. Nathan knelt beside her chair. Or you're letting them manipulate you into giving up everything you want by making you responsible for their bad business decisions. It doesn't matter if it's manipulation. The result is the same. So what are you going to do? Clara wiped her eyes, and Nathan saw the moment she made her choice. It was there in the set of her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened with resolve. I'm going to do what I should have done 2 years ago. I'm going to face my responsibilities instead of running from them. The words hit Nathan harder than any of James's insults. You're going back. I have to. No, you don't. Nathan, 500 people. We'll find other work. But you'll only get one life, Clara. One chance to choose what you really want instead of what everyone else needs from you. And what I want doesn't matter when it costs other people everything? Nathan stood, feeling the familiar weight of loss settling over him. He'd known this was coming. Known from the moment James appeared that he'd never be able to compete with $60,000 and family obligation. When do you leave? The train's at 3. Then we should get you packed. Nathan, it's fine. I understand. He headed for the door, needing air, needing space, needing to rebuild the walls he'd let Clara dismantle. I'll wait outside. He made it to the hotel entrance before Clara caught his arm. Don't do this, she said. Don't shut me out. I'm not shutting you out. I'm accepting reality. You're going back to Boston. I'm staying here. End of story. It doesn't have to be. Yes, it does. Because I can't give you what they can. I can't give you security or wealth or a way to save 500 families. All I've got is a struggling ranch and a house full of ghosts. Nathan forced himself to meet her eyes. Go back to Boston, Clara. Take the money.
Save the workers. Live the life you deserve. The life I deserve is the one I choose. Then choose. But choose honestly. Don't stay here out of guilt or pity or some misguided sense of loyalty to a broken-down cowboy you've known for 3 weeks. Clara's face crumpled. Is that what you think? That I'd stay out of pity? I think you're a good person who tries to save everyone. But you can't save me, Clara. I've been lost for 20 years, and 3 weeks of warm meals don't change that. You're not lost. You're scared. The accusation stung because it was true. Nathan was terrified of wanting something, of losing something, of believing for even a moment that happiness might be possible. Maybe I am, but that doesn't change anything. It changes everything. Clara grabbed both his hands, forcing him to face her. I came to Wyoming to escape. But these past weeks with you, I haven't been running. I've been building something real. And I think you have too. Reality is that train leaving at 3 o'clock, and you need to be on it. Why? So you can go back to being alone? So you can prove to yourself that you were right to never let anyone close? So you can do what's right for those workers and for yourself. And what about what's right for us? The question hung between them. Nathan wanted to answer honestly, to tell her that every moment with her had felt like coming back to life after 20 years of being dead. But the words stuck in his throat, trapped behind decades of fear and loss. There is no us, Clara. There's just 2 people who helped each other for a little while. Clara stepped back like he'd slapped her. Fine, if that's what you need to believe. She walked past him out of the hotel. Nathan followed, maintaining distance. They rode back to the ranch in crushing silence. At the house, Clara packed her few belongings with mechanical efficiency. Nathan stood in the doorway watching, memorizing the way she folded her clothes, the set of her shoulders, the quiet determination in every movement. I'll drive you back to town, he said. I can walk. It's 3 miles. I've walked farther. But she let him hitch the wagon anyway. As they drove back toward town, Clara spoke without looking at him. I need to tell you something. About the garden. What about it? I planted 3 different kinds of beans, fast-growing ones that'll be ready in 60 days. You need to water them every other day, more if it's hot. The tomatoes need stakes or they'll fall over. And the herbs along the edge, those are perennials. They'll come back every year if you let them. Nathan's throat tightened. Why are you telling me this? Because someone should care for them, even if it's not me. They reached town with an hour to spare. Clara climbed down from the wagon, her bag in hand. Thank you, she said, for everything. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You gave me a home when I needed one. You treated me like an equal when everyone else saw me as a burden or a scandal. You made me believe I could choose my own path. Clara's voice broke. Even if I'm choosing the wrong one now. It's not wrong if it's what you need to do. Keep telling yourself that, Nathan. Maybe eventually you'll believe it. She turned to leave, and Nathan knew this was his last chance. Last chance to fight for something instead of letting it slip away. Last chance to be brave instead of safe. Clara, wait. She stopped, but didn't turn around. If you get on that train, I understand. But I need you to know something. Nathan took a breath. These 3 weeks weren't nothing to me. You weren't nothing to me. And I'm sorry I'm not brave enough to ask you to stay. Clara turned then, tears streaming down her face. What if I'm not brave enough to go? Then don't.
But the workers will survive.
People are tougher than the Whitmores think. But if you get on that train, I don't know if I will." The confession hung between them. Clara crossed the distance, standing close enough that Nathan could see every tear, every doubt, every hope in her eyes. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You've known since the moment James showed up. You're just afraid to choose it. Because choosing wrong means destroying everything. And choosing right might too. But at least you'll know you chose, instead of letting them choose for you." A train whistle sounded in the distance. 15 minutes until departure. Clara looked toward the station, then back at Nathan. "If I stay, everything changes. If you go, nothing ever will." Clara closed her eyes. Nathan watched her face, seeing the decision form like dawn breaking over the mountains. When she opened her eyes again, they were clear. "Help me with my bag." "Clara, I said, help me with my bag." "I'm going to tell James Whitmore exactly what I think of his inheritance and his conditions and his manipulation. And then I'm going to come back to your ranch and plant the rest of that garden. Because damn what they want, damn what's expected, and damn the fear that's been controlling my life for 2 years." Nathan felt something in his chest crack wide open. "You're sure? I've never been more terrified or more certain in my life." Clara grabbed his hand. "Now take me to that station before I lose my nerve." They ran. James was already on the platform when they arrived, checking his pocket watch with the satisfied air of a man who'd won. "Clara, I'm glad you came to your senses." "I came to tell you no." Clara's voice rang clear across the platform. "I'm not taking the inheritance. I'm not going back to Boston. And I'm not letting you or anyone else control my life anymore." James's smile froze. "Don't be ridiculous. The train's about to leave. Then you should get on it." "Clara, think about the workers." "I have thought about them. And I think the Whitmore family has been using them as leverage for too long. If you really cared about those 500 families, you'd run the business properly instead of threatening to sell it every time someone doesn't do what you want." Blackwell stepped forward. "Miss Whitmore, you're making a terrible mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." Clara pulled the inheritance papers from her bag and tore them cleanly in half. "Tell William I'm sorry I can't be there, but I won't trade my freedom for his peace of mind." She dropped the torn papers at James's feet. His face went dark red. "You ungrateful! This family gave you everything. Thomas gave you everything." "Thomas gave me friendship and kindness. Your family gave me expectations and control." Clara's voice didn't waver. "There's a difference." "You'll regret this," James hissed. "When winter comes and you're starving in this God-forsaken territory, don't come crawling back to Boston." "I won't have to. I have everything I need right here." The train whistle blew. Victor and Blackwell climbed aboard, but James stayed on the platform, his eyes fixed on Nathan. "This is your doing. You convinced her to throw away her future." "I told her to get on the train," Nathan said evenly. "She chose to stay." "How convenient for you. $60,000 walks into your life, and you just happen to make her fall in love with you." Clara stepped between them. "Nobody made me do anything. That's the point you've never understood. I'm capable of making my own decisions." "Bad decisions." "They're mine, and that makes them right." James's expression shifted to something uglier, contempt mixed with calculation. "Fine. Keep your cowboy and your poverty. But don't think this is over. The Whitmore family doesn't forget betrayal." He climbed onto the train as it started moving. Through the window, Nathan saw him staring back, and the look in his eyes promised
This wasn't finished. Clara watched the train disappear, her whole body trembling. Nathan put his hand on her shoulder. "You okay?" "Ask me tomorrow." She turned to face him, and her eyes were blazing. "Right now, I need to get very drunk, or scream at the sky, or something equally dramatic. How about we just go home?" "Home." Clara tested the word. "Yes, let's go home." They made it halfway to the wagon before Sheriff Dawson intercepted them, his face troubled. "Miss Whitmore, I need to speak with you." "If this is about propriety—" "It's about your teaching position." Dawson shifted uncomfortably. "The school board had an emergency meeting this morning. They've decided to terminate your contract." The words hit like a physical blow. Clara went pale. "On what grounds?" "They said a woman living in sin with a bachelor can't be trusted to teach moral values to children." "I'm not living in sin. I'm renting a room." "That's not how Mrs. Henderson and her committee see it. And with your husband's family leaving town, saying you chose scandal over duty." Dawson looked genuinely sorry. "I tried to argue on your behalf, but they voted 4-1 against you." Nathan felt rage build in his chest. "Who voted against?" "Henderson, Pritchard, Colson, and Matthews." "The Reverend voted to fire her?" "He said he couldn't in good conscience support a teacher whose morals were questionable." Clara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So I turned down $60,000 to stay here and teach, and they fired me for making that choice." "I'm sorry," Dawson said. "If there's anything I can do—" "There isn't. But thank you for trying." The sheriff tipped his hat and left. Clara stood frozen, and Nathan could see her processing the implications. No job, no income, no independent way to support herself in Wyoming. "Well," she said finally, "I suppose James was right about one thing. I'm an idiot." "You're not an idiot." "I just gave up a fortune and lost my job in the same day. What would you call it?" "Brave. Stupid brave, maybe, but brave." Clara's laugh was shaky. "Brave doesn't pay for food." "No, but ranching does, when it's done right. And I could use a partner." She looked at him sharply. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the ranch is struggling because I've been running it alone. But with 2 people, we could expand. Raise more cattle, maybe buy some breeding horses. Split the work and split the profit." "Nathan, I don't know anything about ranching." "You know how to work hard. You know how to stick with something when it gets difficult. That's more than most hired hands bring." He paused. "And you already proved you can turn dead soil into a garden. Imagine what you could do with the rest of the land." Clara studied his face. "Is this charity?" "It's business. I need help. You need income. We work together. We both benefit." "And the town?" "Can go to hell. We're not doing this for them." Clara took a breath, then nodded. "All right. Partners. But I want a fair wage, not handouts." "Deal. 20% of the ranch profits plus room and board." 30%. I'll be doing half the work." 25. You'll be learning while you work." "Deal." Clara stuck out her hand. Nathan shook it, feeling the strength in her grip. "When do I start?" "Right now. The fence on the north pasture needs mending." They worked until sunset, Clara learning how to string barbed wire without getting cut, Nathan teaching her the rhythm of ranch work. By the time they finished, Clara's hands were blistered and her dress was torn, but her eyes were alive with accomplishment.
"I did it," she said, staring at the mended fence. "You did. Tomorrow we'll work on branding."
"There's more?"
"There's always more. That's ranching."
They rode home in the gathering dark. At the house, Clara cooked supper while Nathan tended the horses. The routine felt natural now, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. Over dinner, Clara asked the question Nathan had been expecting. What happens when the town makes this impossible? When they refuse to sell us supplies or serve us in the general store? Then we go to the next town over. It's farther, but we'll manage. And when they spread rumors about us? When they make it so toxic that no one will do business with us? Then we prove them wrong by succeeding anyway. Nathan set down his fork. Clara, I won't lie to you. This is going to be hard, harder than you think. But if you're serious about staying, we'll find a way to make it work. I'm serious. I just don't want you to resent me when the whole territory turns against us. If they turn against us, it'll be because they're too small-minded to see what we're building. That's their loss, not ours. Clara smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's just necessary. They finished dinner in thoughtful silence. Clara washed dishes while Nathan worked on the ranch books, tallying numbers that didn't quite add up. The drought had hurt more than he'd admitted, and beef prices were down. Even with Clara's help, they'd need a good year to break even. A knock at the door interrupted his calculations. Nathan opened it to find Tom Miller, one of the neighboring ranchers, hat in hand. Tom, what brings you out this late? Need to talk to you about the water situation. Nathan stepped outside, closing the door behind him. What about it? Creek's running lower than usual. Me and Dawson were thinking about damming it up on our property. Keep enough water for our herds. That creek runs through my land too. I know, but you got the smallest herd. Seemed fair that those with more cattle get first access to water. Nathan felt his jaw tighten. Fair would be sharing it equally, like we always have. That was before you had other priorities. Tom glanced toward the house. Word is you're distracted these days. Maybe not paying attention to ranch business like you should. My personal business doesn't affect the water rights. Maybe it should. Man who can't manage his own reputation probably can't manage his resources either. Get off my property, Tom. Just being neighborly. Thought you should know how folks are thinking. Now I know. Leave. Tom tipped his hat and rode off. Nathan stood in the dark, rage and frustration warring in his chest. It was starting. The isolation, the pressure, the slow squeeze that would make staying here untenable. He went back inside to find Clara waiting. What did he want? Nathan considered lying, protecting her from the reality of what they were facing. But Clara deserved the truth. He wanted to cut off our water rights, claim the creek for himself and Dawson. Can he do that? Not legally, but if enough ranches decide I'm not worth defending, they can make my life hell until I give up and sell. Clara's face hardened. Then we don't give up. Clara, I didn't turn down $60,000 to let Tom Miller and his creek politics run us off. We fight. Fighting requires resources we don't have. Then we get creative. Clara started pacing, her mind clearly working. What if we dug a well, or diverted part of the creek before it reaches their property? Well costs money. Diversion requires equipment we can't afford. What about allies? There must be other ranchers who don't agree with Miller. Nathan thought about it. Old Jack Patterson never much liked Miller. And the widow Chen might support us. She knows what it's like to be squeezed out. Then we talk to them. Build a coalition. Make it clear that what Miller's doing to us, he could do to anyone. Nathan looked at this woman who'd been in Wyoming less than a month, already thinking like a rancher, already fighting like someone with everything to lose. You're something else. You know that? I'm a partner. Partners solve problems together. They stayed up late making plans. Who to approach, what to offer, how to protect their water rights without starting a war with the neighboring ranches. By the time they finished, Nathan's head ached and his eyes burned. But he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next morning, they rode out to the Patterson Ranch. Jack was 70 if he was a day, weathered and tough as old leather.
He listened to their proposal without interrupting. "So Miller's making a move," he said finally. "Been expecting that. Man's got ambitions bigger than his sense."
"Will you stand with us?" Clara asked.
"What's in it for me?"
"Fair access to water, and the knowledge that if we don't stop this now, you could be next." Jack studied Clara with interest.
"You're the teacher they fired."
"I am."
"Heard you turned down a fortune to stay here."
"I did."
"That makes you either the bravest woman in Wyoming or the biggest fool."
Jack smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth.
"I'm betting on brave. All right, I'm in. But this better not backfire on me."
"It won't," Nathan promised. "We're going to do this right." They spent the next week building their coalition. The widow Chen agreed to support them. 2 smaller ranchers who'd been squeezed by Miller in the past signed on. By the end of the week, they had enough backing to call a meeting.
The gathering happened in the church, neutral ground where everyone had to behave. Miller showed up with Dawson and 3 other ranchers who supported the dam plan. Nathan brought his coalition and Clara. Reverend Matthews called the meeting to order, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. "We're here to discuss water rights and access to Miller Creek. Tom, you want to explain your position?" Miller stood, confident and smooth. "Simple economics. Creek's running low this year. I've got 200 head of cattle that need water. Dawson's got 150. Cole's got 70 at most. Makes sense the water goes where it's most needed."
"Most profitable, you mean?" Clara said quietly.
All eyes turned to her. Matthews frowned. "This is a ranchers' meeting, Miss Whitmore."
"Mrs. Whitmore. And I'm a partner in the Cole Ranch, which gives me as much right to speak as anyone here."
"Partner." Miller's tone made the word an insult.
"Is that what they're calling it now?" Nathan started to stand, but Clara put a hand on his arm. "Call it whatever you want, Mr. Miller. The point is, that creek runs through Cole property before it reaches yours, which means any dam you build affects our water first."
"The creek starts on my land."
"But it doesn't stay there. Water flows downhill, and last I checked, that made it a shared resource."
Clara pulled out a hand-drawn map.
"I've been studying the survey records. The creek originates in the high country, runs through Patterson's northern pasture, crosses Cole land for half a mile, then flows into Miller and Dawson territory. Under Wyoming water law, upstream users can't unreasonably restrict flow to downstream users."
Miller's face went red. "You've been here a month, and you think you know water law?"
"I know how to read, and I know the difference between sharing a resource and hoarding it."
"This is ridiculous," Dawson interjected.
"We're trying to protect our livelihoods."
"So are we," Nathan said. "Difference is, we're trying to do it without destroying everyone else's." The argument went on for another hour, voices rising and tempers flaring. Finally, Reverend Matthews called for a vote. When the hands went up, Nathan's coalition won by a single vote. Miller stood slowly, his face like thunder. "This isn't over, Cole. You think your little partnership gives you power? Wait until winter. Wait until the real hardships start. Then we'll see how long your alliance holds." He stormed out, Dawson and his supporters following. The remaining ranchers looked uncomfortable, like they'd just made enemies they couldn't afford. Jack Patterson clapped Nathan on the shoulder. "You made an enemy today, son." "I know. But you also made a point. Can't let men like Miller run roughshod over everyone just because they've got bigger herds." He nodded to Clara. "Your partner's got steel in her spine. Rare thing." After everyone left, Nathan and Clara stood alone in the empty church. "We won," Clara said, but she didn't sound happy. "We won this round. Miller's not going to forget it."
Good. Let him remember. Let them all remember that we don't back down.
Nathan looked at her, this woman who'd walked into his life uninvited and turned everything upside down. A month ago, he'd wanted nothing but solitude. Now he couldn't imagine facing any of this alone. "Clara, there's something I need to say."
What?
The words stuck in his throat. 20 years of fear fighting against the truth he could no longer deny. But before he could speak, Clara stepped closer. "If you're about to apologize for getting me into this mess, don't. I chose this. I chose you, and I'd do it again." "Even knowing what it'll cost?"
"Especially knowing what it'll cost. Because the alternative is a life where I'm safe and comfortable and completely dead inside."
Clara took his hand.
"I've been dead for 2 years, Nathan. These past weeks with you are the first time I've felt alive since Thomas died. So whatever comes next, we face it together, as partners."
Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. She fit there perfectly, like she'd been made to fill the empty spaces in his life. "I'm going to ask you something," he said into her hair. "But not yet. Not until I've got something to offer besides hard work and enemies." Clara pulled back to look at him.
"What if hard work and enemies are enough?"
"They're not."
"They are to me."
Nathan kissed her forehead, a promise of more when the time was right. For now, this was enough. Standing together in an empty church, having just made enemies of half the territory, with nothing but each other and stubborn hope. They walked out into the afternoon sun, and Nathan realized something had shifted. He wasn't surviving anymore. He was living. And it terrified him as much as it exhilarated him.
"Come on," Clara said, tugging his hand. "We've got a ranch to run and a garden to tend. And I'm not letting Tom Miller or anyone else stop us from building the life we want."
Nathan followed her to the wagon, watching the way the sun caught in her hair, the determined set of her shoulders. She was right. They'd face whatever came next together. And somehow, that made even the impossible seem achievable. The retaliation started 3 days later. Nathan came in from the north pasture to find Clara standing by the barn, staring at the ground. 20 feet of fence had been cut clean through, and half their cattle were missing. "How many?" he asked, already knowing the answer would hurt.
35 head, maybe more. They scattered before I could count."
Nathan examined the cut wire. Clean slices, done with purpose, not accident. This wasn't weather damage or loose animals. This was sabotage. Miller.
"You can't prove that."
"I don't need to prove it. I know it." Nathan stood, rage burning in his chest. He's sending a message. Then we send one back. We find the cattle, and we repair the fence, and we don't give him the satisfaction of seeing us break. They spent the next 2 days tracking down their scattered herd. By the time they finished, they'd recovered 28 head. 7 were gone, probably driven onto Miller's land and already mixed with his herd. The financial loss stung, but the message stung worse. Miller was telling them he could take whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and there was nothing they could do about it. That night, Nathan found Clara in the kitchen, Thomas's pocket watch open in her palm again. "You regretting your choice yet?" he asked.
"Every single day."
She looked up at him, and her eyes were fierce.
"And I'd still make it again tomorrow."
"Even if we lose everything?"
"We won't lose everything. We'll lose cattle and money and maybe our standing in this territory. But we won't lose what matters."
Clara closed the watch. "Besides, I didn't come to Wyoming to play it safe. No, you came here to teach.
I came here to live. Teaching was just the excuse.
She stood and crossed to him. Stop trying to give me reasons to leave, Nathan. It's not going to work. I'm not. Yes, you are. Every time something goes wrong, you look at me like you're waiting for me to realize I made a mistake. Like you're waiting for me to prove you were right about being alone. Clara put her hand on his chest. But I'm not going anywhere. So you might as well stop preparing for me to leave and start accepting that I'm staying. Nathan covered her hand with his. What if I can't protect you? I don't need you to protect me. I need you to stand with me. There's a difference. Before Nathan could respond, hoofbeats thundered into the yard. He grabbed his rifle and opened the door to find Jack Patterson sliding off his horse, blood soaking through his shirt. Jack!
Miller's men jumped me on the road, tried to run me off. Jack stumbled, and Nathan caught him. Said I should reconsider my vote. Said accidents happen to people who side with the wrong folks. Clara was already moving, helping Nathan get Jack inside. She tore open his shirt, revealing a deep gash across his ribs.
This needs a doctor, she said.
Can't go to town. Doc Pritchard's on Miller's side. Jack grimaced. Just patch me up and let me rest. Clara worked quickly, cleaning the wound and stitching it closed with steady hands. Jack didn't make a sound, but Nathan saw the pain in his eyes. This is my fault, Nathan said. I pulled you into this. I pulled myself in. Been waiting for someone to stand up to Miller for years. Jack took the whiskey Clara offered him. But we need to be smart about this. Miller's not going to stop with cut fences and intimidation. He wants your land, Nathan. Wants the creek access all to himself. He can't force me to sell.
No, but he can make it so miserable you give up. And if that doesn't work, Jack trailed off, his meaning clear. Clara's face went pale. You think he'd kill for it? I think desperate men do desperate things. And Miller's desperate to be the biggest rancher in the territory. After Jack fell asleep on the couch, Nathan and Clara sat at the kitchen table, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. We should go to the law, Clara said. Sheriff Dawson's with Miller. We've got no law on our side. Then we go over his head. Write to the territorial governor. Document everything that's happening. By the time anyone responds, we could be dead or bankrupt. Clara slammed her hand on the table. So what do you suggest? We just accept that Miller wins? That he gets to steal our land and our livelihood because he's bigger and meaner? I don't know. Nathan's voice rose. I don't know how to fight someone who's willing to do whatever it takes while I'm trying to stay on the right side of the law. Then maybe it's time to stop playing by rules Miller doesn't follow. What's that mean? Clara's eyes were hard. It means we gather evidence, real evidence. We catch him in the act, and we make it impossible for anyone to ignore what he's doing. That's dangerous. Everything about this is dangerous. At least this way we're taking action, instead of just waiting for the next attack. Nathan looked at this woman who'd come into his life cooking supper, and was now planning a counter-offensive against the most powerful rancher in the territory. She was right. Playing defense wasn't working. All right, how do we do this? They spent the next week watching, waiting, documenting. Clara kept a detailed log of every incident. Cut fences, missing cattle, threatening visits. Nathan rode the property lines at night, watching for Miller's men. On the 8th night, he saw them. 4 riders cutting through his fence, driving his cattle onto Miller's land. Nathan marked their faces, memorized the brands on their horses, and rode straight to the Widow Chen's ranch. I need witnesses, he told her. People Miller can't intimidate or buy off. Mrs. Chen listened to his plan, then smiled. I'm too old to be scared of Tom Miller. I'll help. They gathered their coalition quietly. Jack, Mrs. Chen, the 2 smaller ranchers, and Clara. At midnight, they positioned themselves around Miller's northern pasture and waited. Just before dawn, Miller's men came back, this time stealing from Mrs. Chen's herd. But this time, 6 witnesses watched it happen. And this time,
Nathan had brought a camera borrowed from the town photographer. The flash lit up the darkness. Miller's men froze, caught in the act, their faces clear in the sudden light. "That's evidence," Clara said quietly. "Real, undeniable evidence."
They brought the photographs to Sheriff Dawson the next morning, along with signed statements from all 6 witnesses. Dawson looked at the evidence, his face going gray. "This is serious." "It's cattle rustling," Nathan said. "That's a hanging offense." "Miller's going to deny everything." "Those are his men. You know it, I know it, everyone in this territory knows it." Nathan leaned forward. "Question is, are you going to do your job, or are you going to let him get away with it because he's your friend?" Dawson stared at the photographs for a long moment. Finally, he stood. "Wait here." He was gone for 2 hours. When he came back, Tom Miller was with him, flanked by 2 deputies. Miller's face was purple with rage. "This is a setup," he snarled. "These are photographs," Dawson said tiredly, "of your men stealing cattle, with 6 witnesses who'll testify to what they saw." "Witnesses can be bought." "Not these ones." Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "I've lived in this territory for 40 years, Tom Miller. I've never lied, and I've never been bought. You want to call me a liar in front of the sheriff? You go right ahead. But it won't change what we all saw." Miller's jaw worked. "This is about the creek. Cole's poisoning everyone against me because I tried to protect my water rights." "This is about you breaking the law," Dawson said. "And I can't ignore evidence like this, Tom. Not with this many witnesses." "So what? You're going to arrest me?" "I'm going to arrest your men, and I'm going to recommend the territorial judge investigate your operation for organized cattle theft." Dawson looked almost sad. "You brought this on yourself." Miller turned to Nathan, his eyes full of venom. "You think you've won? You've made an enemy for life." "Good. At least now everyone knows what you really are." The deputies took Miller away. Dawson stayed behind, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry it came to this," he said to Nathan. "But he went too far. He went too far the first time he cut my fence. You just chose not to see it until you couldn't ignore it anymore." Dawson nodded and left. Nathan turned to find Clara watching him, pride and exhaustion in her eyes. "We did it," she said. "We survived. That's not the same as winning. It's close enough for now." Word of Miller's arrest spread through the territory like wildfire. Some people celebrated the downfall of a bully. Others whispered that Nathan Cole had gotten too big for his britches, going after a respected rancher. But the rustling stopped. The intimidation stopped. And for the first time in weeks, Nathan and Clara could work their ranch without looking over their shoulders. 3 weeks after Miller's arrest, Nathan came in from the pasture to find Clara standing in the garden, her hands on her hips, surveying the results of their labor. The beans had come in. The tomatoes were ripening on their stakes. The herbs flourished along the edges. It was a small garden, nothing compared to what his mother had grown, but it was alive, thriving, proof that dead things could bloom again if someone cared enough to tend them. "It worked," Clara said, wonder in her voice. "I actually grew something." "You grew a lot of things." Nathan came to stand beside her. "Garden's just one of them." Clara looked at him, and he saw the question in her eyes. They'd been dancing around this for weeks. The feelings neither was quite brave enough to name. The future neither was quite ready to claim. "Clara, there's something I need to ask you." "Nathan, wait." She turned to face him fully. "Before you say whatever you're about to say, I need you to know something. I didn't stay because I was trying to prove anything. I didn't stay because I wanted to fight Miller or save the ranch or any of the noble reasons people might assume. I stayed because for the first time in my life, I woke up excited about the day instead of dreading it. I stayed because you looked at me like I was strong enough to handle the truth,
instead of too fragile to bear reality. I stayed because this, she gestured at the ranch, the garden, the house, feels more like home than anywhere I've ever lived. Nathan felt his throat tighten. You done? For now. Good, because I've been trying to say this for weeks, and I keep getting interrupted. He took her hands. I'm not good at this. I haven't cared about anyone in 20 years, and I've forgotten how to do it right. But I know I don't want to wake up another morning without you in this house. I know I don't want to sit at this table alone ever again. And I know that whatever life we're building here, I want to build it with you. Officially. Permanently. As my wife, not my partner. Clara's eyes filled with tears.
Nathan Cole, are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking if you'll stay. Forever. Even when it's hard. Even when the whole territory thinks we're crazy. Even when I'm difficult and stubborn and too broken to deserve you. You're not broken. We're both cracked. But maybe cracked things fit together better because they understand each other's sharp edges. Clara laughed through her tears. That might be the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. Is that a yes? It's a yes. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll stay forever. Yes to all of it, even the parts that scare me to death. Nathan pulled her close and kissed her, tasting salt and joy and the promise of every tomorrow they'd build together. When they finally broke apart, Clara was smiling. We should probably tell people. Let them figure it out. Nathan, we can't just get married without telling anyone. Watch me. But Clara was already planning, her mind working through logistics. We'll need a reverend. And witnesses. And, oh God, the town is going to lose their minds. Good. Let them talk. They've been talking this whole time anyway. They were married 2 weeks later, in the same church where they'd fought for their water rights. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with obvious reluctance, but Jack Patterson's steady glare kept him from refusing outright. Mrs. Chen stood as Clara's witness. Jack stood for Nathan. The church was half empty, some people staying away out of disapproval, others staying away out of fear of being associated with the couple who'd taken down Tom Miller. But the people who came mattered, and when Nathan said his vows, looking into Clara's eyes, he meant every word. I promise to stand with you, to fight beside you, to never let you face anything alone, to tend this life we're building like you tend that garden, with care and patience and stubborn hope. Clara's vows were simpler. I promise to stay, through every season, through every storm, until the day I die. They sealed their promises with a kiss, and the small gathering erupted in genuine applause. At the ranch that night, they sat on the porch watching the sunset over the Wyoming plains. Clara leaned against Nathan's shoulder, his arm around her waist. Do you regret it? She asked. Letting me stay that first night? Every single day, she elbowed him. Liar. You're right. I don't regret it. I'm terrified by it, grateful for it, confused by it. But I don't regret it. Good, because I'm not going anywhere. I know. You've made that abundantly clear. They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned purple and gold. Finally, Clara spoke again. Nathan, thank you for setting 2 plates on the table that first night, for letting me cook you supper, for giving me a chance to prove I was worth the trouble. You were never trouble. You were a miracle I was too scared to believe in. And now? Now I believe. In you. In us. In the crazy idea that 2 broken people can build something whole together. Clara kissed his cheek. Come on, let's go inside. I made supper, and it's getting cold. Nathan followed her into the house. Their house now, fully and completely theirs.
2 plates waited on the table, just like that first night. But everything had changed. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't empty. He wasn't just surviving. He was living. With a woman who'd walked into his life uninvited and taught him that the bravest thing a lonely heart could do was let someone in. And every night from that day forward, Clara set 2 plates on the table. Because she'd chosen to stay, and Nathan had chosen to let her. And together, they'd built a life that proved love didn't require perfection. It just required showing up, every single day, ready to fight for what mattered most.